Good evening, everybody. You were expecting maybe Laura Flanders, who's listed in your program as welcoming, but don't worry, she's right there, and she's going to be up here in a little bit. I, however, am Gary Lamarche, the chair of the board of the New Press, and very proud to be it. I am I find myself a little hoarse because it's been a while since I've been in a room where I've had to raise my voice in order to be heard, and I'm a little out of practice, but I think I have a little bit left just to make a couple of welcoming remarks to you all. You know, there has never been a time that I can recall in the several-decade history of the New Press which was a better match for the times that the New Press was really built to address. We're living in a time of the gravest threats to democracy in a century, with a very real possibility that it's on the line. It is on the line. We're living in a time of racial reckoning. We're living in a time where we're at a potentially transformational moment to finally address serious issues of poverty and economic justice. And all those things are happening at the same time, and all those things play to the core strengths of the New Press. And our honorees tonight, who you'll hear from in a little while when they receive their awards and when they're in conversation with Laura, embody in themselves the values and approach of the New Press. They deal with complex social issues in a way that compels attention, and they appeal to intellect and emotions, and they understand the power of stories. Central to our existence, the existence of the New Press, is the power of the written word to drive narrative and social change. We believe very deeply in that. With all the other media available to us, books remain the kind of core delivery system for ideas. We were able to do that with the new Jim Crow 10 years ago with Michelle Alexander's book that really changed the conversation around mass incarceration in this country. We were proud to be able to do it by publishing the Reader on Critical Race Theory that brought those ideas more into the mainstream of public debate and awareness. And you'll be hearing more about that a little bit later. And if you look at the debates we're living through right now, you'll find New Press authors of the past and of the future central to them. Pramila Jayapal, our friend, is the face of the kind of progressive movement in Congress at a moment of great opportunity for this country. She's a New Press author. Ai-jen Poo, we published her book, and the care economy issues are really front and center, or should be, in the current debates over expansion of the social safety net in this country. Saru Jarainen, whose new book, One Fair Wage, is coming out, the New Press is bringing out in the next round of books, is really driving a lot of the change in this country around wages and work. And if you look at the other books on our current list and the list that is of books that are coming in the short term, there are several about U.S. constitutional rights debates. So one of our authors, my friend John Cowell, is here, who with his colleague Wilfred Codrington has a terrific new book about the People's Constitution. We're bringing out a book by Elie Mystal about called Allow Me to Retort. I think it's called A Black Guy's Guide to the Constitution. As many of you know, if you got Jamie Raskin to sign it, we're publishing the trial transcripts of the impeachment trial. Miles Rappaport and E.J. Dionne are bringing out a book shortly from the New Press called 100% Democracy, which is about a move for universal voting. That could hardly be more timely. We've just reissued our books on remembering Jim Crow and remembering slavery. We have an enormous backlist, and as many of you are aware, when last year, in the middle of the racial reckoning brought on by the murder of George Floyd, the New Press is perhaps the leading publisher in the country of books on racial justice, in particular about racial justice and criminal justice system, was really central to being able to get those books out into the public debate. And as you'll hear a little bit more later about the Nobel Prize winner, I'm going to save that for Diane. So I want to say that, only finally to say that we are a nonprofit publishing house. We are an unusual organization which has earned income from the sale of books, but also contributed income. And we need that contributed income so that we can continue to publish the books of the voices of people who are insufficiently heard in this society and the ideas that need to get more into the public debate in this society, and that depends on people like you, and it depends on the generosity that all of you have shown by being here tonight in supporting the New Press through this, our first Social Justice Gala in a couple of years. So with that, I want to say that this work is led, I happen to have the privilege of chairing the board, many of whose members are here tonight, but it's led by a brilliant and innovative staff. And the person who leads that staff and has for many years and who is going to speak to you now is a combination of talent scout, people connector, idea generator, life coach, cat herder, money tree shaker, Diane Wachtel.
Hello, everyone. Gary, you jumped off the stage before I could hug you. Thank you for that. And thank you for being our board chair. Gara has been a resource for the organization and for me personally. We are so lucky to have him in this position, so thank you. Thank you all. Yeah. Thank you all so much for coming out tonight. This is my first gala in 2 years. I'm guessing it's the first for a lot of you too. First time in heels. If I fall, you'll know why. And it is just amazing to be sitting here in this room with two of my personal idols, Kim Crenshaw and Jamie Raskin. So the two of them have largely defined, as Gara was saying, our political lives in 2021. Apart from the pandemic, there's really nothing looming larger in our collective psyche than the assault on democracy and the cultural assault on our attempts to reckon with this country's racial past. The co-opting of critical race theory has been something to behold. We will get to that later on tonight. I wanted to just tell you a little bit about the last year or two at the New Press, which have been extraordinary. We have never seen anything like this. So as Gara said, well, 2020 was a roller coaster ride for us. It was completely head spinning. We almost went out of business in the first months of COVID. Independent bookstores closed. Amazon stopped shipping books. And we had the 3 worst sales months in New Press history. We were hanging on by a thread. We are still here, honestly, thanks to the generosity of many of you and many other people who saw us through the bad times. That said, as Gara also said, the world changed for us completely in the wake of the murders of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and others, and the racial justice protests. And back to back with our 3 worst months of sales, we had our 3 best months of sales. It was wild. My head is still spinning. We don't know which way is up. But our entire backlist of titles on structural racism, economic inequality, police brutality, and all the, that constellation of topics was suddenly what the country turned to explain what was going on. So that was a very wild ride. 2021 has been fun in a different way. 2021 looks like the year of prizes for the New Press. I hope all of you saw 3 weeks ago that a little-known Zanzibarian author named Abdul Razak Gurnah won the Nobel Prize in Literature. So we first published Abdul Razak's novel Paradise in 1994. The press published our first book in 92, so that was very, very early for us. And we did 2 subsequent books. We don't have a big literature literature program, but the idea is to introduce Americans to voices from around the world that maybe they wouldn't hear from otherwise. And well, imagine our surprise when 25 years later that author it just blew our minds. So Paradise, which the New York Times called his breakthrough novel, is currently the only one of his books available in the US, which is a very happy situation for us. We've sold 20,000 copies of that book in the last 3 weeks. to give you a sense of scale, because I know that's not a really big number, but our average work of fiction sells 1,200 copies. I mean, this is just extraordinary for us. And the very nice news is that you will each find a copy of Paradise in your goodie bag at the end of the evening. Another book that is doing very well for us is a work of history called Blood on the River. This is the story of a little-known 18th century slave result in Guyana that came very close to succeeding. And had it succeeded, it would have changed the course of American history. That book has been called the Best Book of the Year by NPR, and it is now a finalist for 2 major awards, the Cundill History Prize, which is a big deal internationally, and the Frederick Douglass Prize, which is a big domestic award. So we'll be hearing in the coming weeks. That book was acquired and edited by my dear longtime colleague, Mark Favreau, who's our Director of Editorial Programs. Mark, I know you're here. Where are you? All the way in the back. Mark is here with his wife, Patty, and his son, Emmett, who I believe gave you your name tag when you came in. And another nice thing that has happened for us and for another New Press colleague, Zakiya Henderson Brown, who I see sitting over there, was just named a finalist for something called the Publishers Weekly Star Watch for a young editor whose star is rising. So fingers crossed. It is remarkable that we were able to be here in person tonight. It is just thrilling for me. And as I've said, I can't think of 2 people we'd rather be honoring, 2 icons of the America we aspire to be, and an America that speaks to justice, inclusion, equity, decency, democracy. Kim and Jamie's leadership over the past years and decades had advanced our understanding of who we are as a country, of what we can and should stand for, and what we stand to lose is if the forces of autocracy and intolerance have their way. Okay, those were my formal remarks. James wrote them. They were very lovely. Thank you, James. I've known these guys for a really long time. I can call them Kim and Jamie. We published Critical Race Theory in 1996. Kim, did you ever think 25 years later we would not be able to keep it in stock? We are running as fast as we can. It's just a wild and crazy time. And we very much look forward to publishing, as Gara said, Intersectionality. As you may know, that is a concept that Kim Crenshaw invented, trademarked. Did you trademark it? Patent it? Not yet. But it speaks to the double bind of racial and gender prejudice. And this will be the first time that Kim's writings, or Professor Crenshaw's writings on the topic, are collected in book form. So we're very excited about that. Okay, so Jamie, I remember rabble-rousing on the steps of Widener Library. We were classmates, class of '83 Harvard, and he's been rabble-rousing ever since. I have been chasing him for a book since college. Jamie, it was good that you did the impeachment, because finally I got a book out of you. Jamie has a big memoir coming from HarperCollins. We will publish our book, and that book will be published in January, so feel free to buy them together. It is called Unthinkable. Is that right? Yeah. And as I hope you saw, we have early galleys of the prosecution of an insurrection, which is a verbatim transcript of the second impeachment of Donald Trump. And Jamie will be happy to sign that for you if he hasn't done that already. So briefly about the New Press. I think most of you know who we are. We are part commercial press, part social change, not-for-profit. I like to say that we're playing the publishing game in 3D. You know, all the gashrai of a publishing house, and then this other axis of being a 501c3 not-for-profit. And in order to walk that very unusual line to use books to leverage social change and so forth, we do rely on contributions, both from philanthropic foundations and from generous donors like all of you. And thank you again for making tonight possible. I think most of you have met, this is kind of funny, actually. The New Press has, for the first time, a major gifts officer, Aranga Fernando, all the way in the back next to Mark. Y'all have probably interacted with him. I can tell you that I had never met him before tonight, and he walked in the door, and I greeted him and thanked him for coming. I thought he was a guest. I had no idea. Anyway, please stay in touch with Oranga. Let him know which books you'd like to see with our compliments. Check out the many, many free events we have all across the country over the course of the year, many of them online. Introduce your reading friends to him. You are all part of the New Press family now, and we want to hear from you and help you connect with the kinds of books and authors that bring you here tonight. We have an exciting conversation ahead, and I'm going to hand the baton to our board member, Robert Raymond, to present Kim and Jamie with their Social Justice Awards.
I was a staffer for 20 years in Congress. That was just killing me. Good evening. My name is Robert Raymond. I work at a firm called the Raymond Group, and we do the public policy and communications on the tough issues that the New Press publishes, and that's the symbiosis, and I think that's why I'm the newest board member, and I'm just so honored for that. And I think I'm reading James' remarks because I'm the board member that brought his or her bifocals. Thank you all for joining. As we celebrate the New Press and honor the contributions of two extraordinary individuals who are an inspiration to all of us and exemplifies so well all that the New Press has championed. Oh my God, I'm so excited. Professor Crenshaw, Congressman Raskin, I will call you that. I have such enormous respect for the work and the leadership that you do, and among the many things that you have in common, you make the difference in the lives of millions and millions and millions of people, not just in this country, but around the world. Your fight and your protection and your love and your passion for holding America to her ideals, this incredible work in progress, through your writing, through your scholarship, through your vision, through your hard work, through your fighting, through showing up every day at an institution that sometimes isn't welcome to you. God bless you for what you're doing, and thank you for the changes that you're making. Professor Crenshaw is a pioneering scholar and writer on civil rights, critical race theory, black feminist legal theory, race, racism, and the law. There's a couple other sentences in there that I have cut. Her first book with the New Press was an anthology on critical race theory, presciently published back in 1995, that's somehow and sadly just as relevant today. In fact, it's, as you heard, selling briskly. It's been a wild and remarkable year for the issue. But scholarship isn't enough for the professor. Most of us are good at either vision or execution, but Professor Crenshaw insists on both. She's got the idea, and then in her spare time, she puts her muscle behind implementation. She founded the African American Policy Forum, the Center for Intersectional Justice. She authored the updated and improved Equal Rights Amendment, which is in play. There are many, many other things. I won't tell all of our secrets. When President Obama launched his My Brother's Keeper program and asked me to set up the private sector parallel, the first visit I got was from Professor Crenshaw, and even though I was grown and experienced in public policy and litigation, and I'm the youngest of 6, I had to sit there and think, she's right. Who's gonna tell Barack? It's an unfinished conversation that we're still having. Everything else everything else I was going to say has been said. We love you. We appreciate you. We thank you for your continued get up every day and how do I make this country better. And on behalf of the New Press, I'm pleased to present to you the 2021 New Press Social Justice Award in recognition and appreciation of your life's work championing civil rights and exposing systems of oppression. Please come up. Thank you, thank you. Yes. Yes, sit there. We'll do pictures after the congressman. In addition, we honor Congressman Jamie Raskin of Maryland. If Congressman Raskin wasn't a household name in the Baltimore-Washington region, he was a household name. But if he wasn't a national household name before the 2020 election, he certainly is now, setting the bar rather high earlier this year when he served as the lead House manager in the second Senate impeachment trial of former President Donald Trump. Unfortunately, these issues continue to haunt our political union. I'm sure we'll hear more about this in the conversation. Congressman Raskin chairs the Civil Rights and Civil Liberties Subcommittee of the House Judiciary Committee, where some of the toughest issues the nation faces are housed. And he is on the Committee of House Administration, which is almost never above the fold in any newspaper, and wrestles with the most complicated issues. The rules of the House, everything from parking, which don't get them started. But I digress. Previously, he was a leader in the Maryland legislature and made his mark not just in Maryland, but nationwide, because he was willing to take on and effectuate some of the toughest issues: same-sex marriage, repeal of the death penalty, drug reform, marijuana, I'm going to say legalization. I may not, yeah, legalization. He's nodding. And chaired Fair Vote, a fantastic and very interesting organization that is trying to make our democratic processes and voting more fair. Congressman Raskin, thank you for all that you do, for fighting the fight and doing it so eloquently. I skipped over when we first met. I think you were general counsel to PUSH, Rainbow Coalition, really well ahead of our time. Pushing this country. Thank you for all of you do. Congressman Raskin, I'm pleased to present you the 2021 New Press Social Justice Award in recognition and appreciation of your life's work championing democracy and defending the rule of law. God bless you for all you do.
Hi, everybody. It's all right. It's all right.
You want to do it?
It's all right. Either go, whatever you want to do.
Thank you. And it is my pleasure. I'm going to read it as is, people. We are excited to have a conversation that Laura Flanders will mediate and facilitate. Thank you for being with us this evening. You are an award-winning broadcast journalist and as you're going to see, fantastic interviewer. She's also a best-selling author with long-standing ties to the New Press, including a Martha's Vineyard interview with Professor Crenshaw this summer. She's emceed previous New Press galas, a contributor to the New Press book Media Matters. And just this past weekend, Laura hosted both Alexandre Ocasio-Cortez and Noam Chomsky in an hour-long uncut interview that's now available on her website, which she's going to tell you is, and you can check out the Laura Flanders Show at, let's all say it, lauraflanders.org.
That's the one. Thank you so much.
lauraflanders.org.
Appreciate it.
We're very lucky to have her here tonight. Thank you very much.
It is, thank you, Robert. It's a tremendous pleasure to be back here with the New Press. I feel like we're family and we're sort of survived and we're in person, and I've read a lot of books in the last couple of years, and I'm really happy just to be talking about books with people that publish them at this moment. Although I was reminded, is Don Guttenplan still here from The Nation? Yeah, so in The Nation, they have a saying about how what's bad for the nation is good for the nation. You know, a little bit of what I heard this evening was, you know, what's bad for truth and democracy is really good for the new press. And we're all living in that interesting Zen quandary. I don't know where to begin with the two of you, because when we're talking about gravest threats, there are many we could pick on. And we could start there, but I just can't quite bear it. I feel like you should have a moment of saying that something good actually happened in Congress, that we actually saw, you know, something happen of a good sort this week. So go ahead, Jamie. Have a moment of joy and happiness, however ambivalent.
I bring you good news from
Thank
Washington.
you.
We passed the infrastructure bill, $1.7 trillion for the roads and the highways and the rivers, the ports, the airports, cybersecurity, the Amtrak, the trains, the rail, yeah. And $10 billion to get the lead out of the pipes in the water. How about that? So when we get back next week, we have every intention of passing the complete Build Back Better program, including universal pre-K for every 3-year-old and 4-year-old in America. So community college, the biggest climate change investment in history, Medicare, not all the way because of Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema, but at least hearing aids for older people in America. How about that? Yeah. Hearing aids. So that's good. We're making the investments that people voted for. We're taking government from being an instrument of corruption and private self-enrichment to being a servant of the common good, the common man, and the common woman again. So we are proud of that.
Okay, now is when I ask you your thoughts on last week's elections.
Everybody was very down in the dumps, and then we saw Rachel Maddow, who did a good job of putting it in perspective. I mean, every time the Democrats win the presidency, the next year in the off-year election, the Republicans win the governorship in Virginia and New Jersey, and we beat that. So she was saying it was a night to celebrate. And when the Republicans win the presidency, we win the governorship in Virginia. So, I mean, it was a little bit of a cold shower with all of the propaganda and disinformation about critical race theory. Kim will get into it, but I was amazed. I didn't realize they were teaching Kim Crenshaw and Gary Delgado and Gary Peller and Derek Bell. Janet Bell is here tonight, by the way. I didn't realize they were teaching that to third graders in Richmond, Virginia, or Loudoun County. But we can talk about that. I mean, we're living in an age of profound disinformation and propaganda, and it's not incidental or passing. That's why when people say to me, you guys just need a message better. You just need a message for a bumper sticker. That's wrong. They've got a complete universe of ideas that they are propounding, and it's basically the equivalent of brainwashing. So we need something far deeper than that. We need the opposite of indoctrination, which is education. And that's what we're fighting for in the country.
And that's where books come in.
That's where books come in. That's where school boards come in. Teachers come in, and to be parochial, that's where my Democracy Summer Project comes in, because I basically, I come from a blue district, and my critique of my beloved colleagues is just people are wasting their blue districts. Use your blue district to mobilize all that surplus enthusiasm, energy, idealism in the young people, resources to raise the money, to raise the young people, and go out and share with the people in the red districts and the purple districts. And that's what Democracy Summer is all about. It's about spreading that youthful exuberance and passion and willingness to learn. So last summer we had 375 young people who spread out across the country to go and learn about voter registration, canvassing, door knocking, digital organizing. This summer we're going to have more than 1,000 do it, and more than 100 members of Congress participate. So I'm very excited about doing that.
Well, I'd like to believe, Congressman, that getting all the Americans who need it hearing aids would help our problem here. I wish it were as simple as that. It's a good thing, though we're for it. Hearing is good.
Yes.
But then there's also the speaking part and the communicating part. And Kim, coming to you about the last week, we have to, I'm afraid, sort of start there. I mean, there's two dreadful ways to approach critical race theory discussion, and we're going to do both of them. One of them is the question, what is critical race theory? And you'll explain why that is so problematic as a question. But the other is, you know, can you just confirm to us that we don't teach critical race theory? I mean, the reaction coming out of Virginia was, but we don't teach it. Obviously, I wish we did. But talk about that question and these two questions, this pair of questions that are so illustrative of the problem.
Yeah, well, thank you for framing it that way. One of the things I've been doing whenever I've been doing the interviews, the first question is, what is critical race theory? And I say, I'm going to answer that in a minute. But my question is, why isn't your first question, who is behind the attack on critical race theory? What are the interests that are being advanced by that? Where's the money that's coming from this, and what's the objective, right? Because if you're not asking that question, you are becoming an arm of what the right-wing strategy is. Because what the right wing wants to do is have us caught up in a conversation of, well, what is it about you guys? What is it that critical race theory is doing that is so threatening? And that is basically following the finger pointing rather than interrogating the finger from which the pointing happens. So it's been a challenging dance to do because you first of all have to confirm that what this is a massive appropriation, a theft of 30 years of ideas. You know, there are people who really put their life work into articulating how racism has been grounded in law, and that framework has spread across the world. That's
Derek
important
Bell,
work.
Yourself, Luke Harris is here,
It's important
among
work.
some of them.
The idea that a filmmaker, a not particularly distinguished guy, could just decide one day that he has found the framework, he has found the special sauce to allow the sentiments that have been generated from the reckoning of last year, which couldn't be articulated in terms of, you know, we support police brutality, couldn't be articulated in terms of we support racism, but that sentiment was there, and it was looking for a framework to attach itself to. And critical race theory became that thing.
You're talking about Christopher Rufo.
Yes. I try not to say his name myself. And so the idea that all of the work was just there to be appropriated, to become the Willie Hortonization of ideological debate, the fact that it could just be taken and done in full sight of everyone, and for the most part, the media didn't really seem to be that concerned about it. I have to say that this time last year, I was pulling out my hair trying to talk to allies, trying to talk to foundations, trying to talk to kind of anybody who was willing to listen, to say, this is going to be a brush fire that if we don't get involved in now, it is going to not only shape the midterms, it's actually a bold effort to shape not only what goes on in K through 12, but what they really want to get to is higher education. And people didn't seem to rise to the occasion, partly because, once again, it was packaged in something that people were unfamiliar with. So we spent a lot of time thinking, what is it? Who is it? What does it do? Rather than, what is the attack on it doing to us? What is it doing to our incredible mobilization that we had last year?
Now, when we were in Martha's Vineyard, we talked about how this wasn't the first time we've seen attacks like this, and attacks that do their work simply in the attacking.
Yes.
As soon as you've called affirmative action quotas, you've done the job.
It's over.
As soon as you've defined choice as being anti-life, you've done the job. Jamie, we'll come back to Kim in a second, but what can you tell us about how your colleagues in Congress grapple with this stuff, or know how to ask questions to get help for grappling with this? How can we keep getting played?
Well, I'll go back to something Kim said. it is a mistake to think that that the right wing, by which I mean the Republican Party, by which I mean the extreme right wing, because it's all the same today, it's a mistake to think that they don't operate on ideas, because they do. They operate on very elaborate, detailed, minute conspiracy theories, lies, disinformation, and they are dense enough and rich enough and medieval enough to really tickle the sorry, yeah, there they go again. They activate the neurotransmitters, the receptors. They give people that blast of dopamine they're looking for. It's like the equivalent. It is a kind of fascist pornography, and people are addicted to it. And it's hundreds of thousands of people and millions of people. And so when we talk about attacks in my world, that's not a rhetorical thing. In my world, attacks are 50,000 armed neo-Nazi extremists, QAnon followers, Proud Boys, Oath Keepers, Aryan Nations, attacking police officers with, mostly minority police officers, by the way, with Confederate battle flags, steel pipes, landing 140 people in the hospital, killing people. I mean, that's where all of this is headed. So, you know, critical race theory, which I was actually, I got to have a couple of classes, including Randy Kennedy's class when I was at Harvard Law School. I mean, I love talking about critical race theory and so on, but I mean, it's just one more bludgeon that they're using against us, and you know, it'll be around for a while as long as they can keep that going, and then they'll pick up another one, and they'll go after that. They don't treat progressive ideas seriously, obviously. They treat their conspiracy theory ideas seriously. So, you know, we've got two choices. Either we turn it back around and we say, okay, and I actually raised this at our caucus. I said, you know what? We should be running in Virginia on them teaching replacement theory in the schools of Virginia. They're teaching people that George Soros and Jews are replacing the population with Hispanic immigrants, and right? Because they certainly propagandize about it. It's on the internet. And then all my colleagues said, but wait, they're not teaching that in the schools of Virginia. I said, exactly. So we say that, and then we say everywhere they're teaching critical race theory, they're teaching replacement theory. But you know, nobody wants to do that because we don't want to sink to their level. But the alternative is we got to go out and educate people about the whole thing, about the history of racism, the history of slavery, and the Dred Scott decision, and Plessy versus Ferguson after the Civil War, and the Reconstruction Amendments, and the civilizing movements of our times that have transformed everything. That's a much taller task to create a real democracy curriculum, but there's really no alternative to doing that, I think, and I consider critical race theory very much a part of it. And by the way, as I understood it, Kim will tell me if I'm wrong because she's expert, critical race theory isn't about giving people a bunch of dogmatic answers about things. It's about asking a whole series of questions about things that are unquestioned, you know, like American constitutional law and contract law and property law. What are the embedded notions of white supremacy that are the underpinnings of a lot of Supreme Court decisions? I mean, and there's nothing remotely esoteric or exotic about that. I mean, it's almost, what they're using critical race theory to say that there is something exotic about it. I mean, to teach the history of racism is just to teach the history of our society. It has been so much a part of it. So it's a frustrating thing that people were thrown off by it because it was just a diversion and distraction from the fact that this was the first big election. Well, we had the California election and we had the special election in New Mexico, both of which we won, Governor Newsom and our new colleague from New Mexico. But it was the first big election on the East Coast anyway, since they tried to overthrow our democratic system of government and execute a coup against Vice President Mike Pence.
A year ago, Kim, the campaign that you're talking about took off after another first, a summer of really the first uprising against white supremacy and policing, in which white people were playing a significant role. To what extent are those two things connected?
Yeah. Well, a lot of the work that we did in 2020 into 2021 was framed through the twin pandemics, the pandemic, the COVID pandemic, and the pandemic around police violence. And I think because the obvious consequences of the COVID infection revealed the way that race actually distributes particular life outcomes. I mean, remember when COVID first hit, people were talking about, this is going to be the great equalizer. COVID knows no race. COVID knows no gender. The idea that the pathogen itself would distribute itself in a race-neutral way was part of the ideology around colorblindness. For us, this was a moment where we could actually make clear when we say race is a fiction that has been made real, right? It's been given materiality because of policies, because of practices, because of laws that have not been interrupted since the past, then we can predict exactly what these outcomes are going to be. So you were one of the people on our Under the Black Light. V was in it. Our whole point was to use this as a teachable moment.
This was a great podcast series that the African American Policy Forum kicked off.
Yeah, under the black light, you can still see them, and then of course after that came the efforts to raise awareness around police violence. Once again, it was a teachable moment. Most people understood that Derek Chauvin's casual taking of George Floyd's life was not simply a matter of a bad apple. People understood at that moment that there needed to be a deeper analysis, a historical analysis, an institutional analysis, a political analysis, to understand how policing has historically been racialized and continues to be. So people were out in the streets and they were demanding conversations, and many institutions were responding like, we hear you, we want to have these conversations. And then of course the backlash hit. And I think that the thing that is really stressful, because people don't seem to fully understand it, many times the backlash can last longer than the reckoning. That's what the end of Reconstruction was all about. We had like 20 years of a good effort at a real multiracial democracy. And that was so intolerable. That was so against the expectations of those who believed that this country was theirs. Such a sense that their diminished overrepresentation was a crisis, that it was destroyed. And that destruction wasn't just for a political season. It was for a century, 7 decades, as a consequence of that retrenchment. So what worries me, what worried me, what continues to keep me up at night, is that it seems as though we are repeating that history. And it's not clear to me that, A, people know that history, right? So to actually get people to recognize it, you have to have had people who were aware of it. And if you actually look at most of our textbooks carry on the lost cause framework, which is, Reconstruction was a disaster. Reconstruction, attacked white people. Reconstruction made white kids feel bad. It made white women insecure. This whole idea of equality has to be limited by the fragility of white people is an old idea, and it's in our textbooks. So this is a moment where people started to try to rethink how we think about our history, and just that little bit of rethinking has created this huge, huge backlash. And what really shocks me, honestly, Laura, is that even within our ranks, there are not a lot of people, anywhere around here that celebrated anything that happened on January 6th. But there are people who think the greatest challenge right now to free ideas is wokeness. There are a lot of people who really believe, that the cancel culture is really what worries us, without recognizing that in more than 12 states, cancel culture is legislated. That's as close to fascism as I can imagine. But people are not talking about that. And I want to understand what it is that people are not seeing, what it is that's not keeping other people up at night about what's happening.
Maureen Dowd, are you listening? Just checking. One of those who, that was her conclusion, wokeness is the problem. Clarify, if you would, Kim, where we do actually stand. Because we can talk at the level of ideas, and your book, in fact, the book that the Critical Race Theory Collection talks beautifully, you in one of your essays, you talk beautifully about exactly this lash being longer than the back, if you know what I mean. Where do we actually stand with respect to people right now? Teachers, students, school budgets, concrete stuff. We just came, my colleague here, Jeremiah Cothran's communications director for the Laura Flanders show, and we just came back from doing an episode in North Carolina where we were doing a story about paramilitary violence and the relationship with January 6th and these military training camps that are happening all over the country in the name of kind of our privatized military. We didn't have a peace dividend, we just privatized a whole lot of military functions, and they're now creating these fantastic places for people to go and train how to join militia organizations. One of the guys that we're going to be featuring in our next, or talking about the resistance to, in our next episode, because the show focuses on the positive, is a guy called David Hensley, who owns one of these paramilitary groups, Quantico Tactical, has $265 million of contracts from the Defense Department, and urged his buddies to go to January 6th and bring back severed ears. And ran for school board last year, is now on the Moore County School Board. This stuff is very real. And the conversation that we have over here about the rule of law and democracy, and the conversation that we have over here about, whoa, we have very different ideas about the national project we are engaged in. These two conversations are taking place over a territory at this moment littered with people in pain and trouble and whose education system is under threat. So can you just give us a quick thumbnail on what is actually happening? And then I would love to hear from you, Congressman, about like what tools exist for us to address this at the level perhaps of legislation, at the level of organizing, and then we're not just talking about messaging. It's a whole lot more than that. But anyway, where do we stand?
Well, you know, I frame this as Tea Party on steroids. If we thought that was bad, that this is going to make that look like, you know,
I think Steve Bannon characterized it that way.
I mean, and that's the thing, Laura. It's not as though we have to decode it. They're telling us. I mean, they're telling us. We're taking these ideas, we are robbing them of any meaning, and we're packing in the meaning that we want, and they're boasting about it, the same as you point out, Tea Party on steroids. So one of the things that is happening, and the backlash against the Biden administration for even acknowledging it is another thing that's chilling. School board members are being threatened, teachers are being threatened, people are recognizing that their lives are on the line. So when the Biden administration, when the Justice Department says they are working in partnership to protect teachers and school board members, and there's this huge backlash on the part of the right, and our response is kind of, you know, tepid. That's exactly what Reconstruction tells us is the wrong thing to do. Because whenever Grant or any of the other Republicans actually tried to reinforce the rule of law, actually tried to reinforce and protect black people, protect Republicans, whenever they got pushed back from that because of concern about loss of votes, the violence went through the roof. So when I look at this and I see actually, you know, teachers worrying about whether they can go to their jobs and still teach the things that they teach, not just being fired, but losing their lives. And I'm not seeing people up in arms about it. That makes me scared, very scared. Now, a lot of things that other people are seeing and talking about, I think is important, like Toni Morrison, we are really going to exclude Toni Morrison from the curriculum. I mean, so that's just the tip of the iceberg. In Texas, they compiled a list of 800 books that they are reviewing for material that makes some people feel discomfort. Now, you know, people can debate white fragility, but if that's not a textbook example of white fragility, I don't know what is. Your telling your history is so emotionally traumatic to me that it has no place in the classroom. So this is happening in Texas, it's happening in other states, and let's just remember, because of the market share of Texas, their decision about what gets included in a textbook is likely to impact textbooks across the country. So we can't just write that off as, oh, crazy Texas. This is going to be a huge pressure on other publishers to fall in line. So I'll just say this last thing, because we talked about this earlier. This is an attack on the most important public institution we have, education. Right? They're using the Trojan horse of race to do it. But at the end of the day, this is about the destruction of public education. It's about the idea that an institution like education, one that is a government-run institution, is conveying the message of equality. They are going after the fundamental principle of equality. They're trying to privatize it. You can't teach my kid this stuff in the school because I object to it. If we lose this battle, if we lose whether you can actually say that equality is a value, a public good in American society, just think about it. What other argument can be made for anything we care about? And that's what's in the Constitution. So, you know, they say that we're un-American. I would say we are more American than they are because we take the Constitution and equality seriously. They see it as an inconvenience.
So, Jamie, what are we going to do about it?
Well, so here's some more good news. And I want everybody to listen carefully here. We are the majority, yes, the mass majority in the country. Hillary beat him by more than 3.5 million votes, even in the popular vote. Biden beat him by 7.5 million votes. We beat them in the congressional elections by 4.5 million votes in 2020. We ended up with a tiny margin because they continue historically to control the means of gerrymandering of our elections. It is a race between the public will, majority rule, these wonderful generations of young people who really are beyond racism and anti-Semitism and homophobia and immigrant bashing. They're a little beyond grammar too, but it's a different problem. But the young generations are coming over to our side. They're registering more than 2-to-1 Democratic in the country. And it's a race between the popular will and their control over anti-democratic instruments like voter suppression, the gerrymandering of our districts, the filibuster in the Senate, court packing, right-wing judicial activism. Yeah, well, the denial of voting rights to our 713,000 brothers and sisters in Washington, D.C., the only residents of a national capital on earth who are disenfranchised in their national parliament. Imagine if you told the people of Paris that they couldn't vote in the National Assembly and be represented. You'd have another French Revolution on your hands, you know? And when I am proud to say, because I was the floor leader, we have passed in the House of Representatives statehood for people in Washington, D.C. twice in the last 2 sessions of Congress. And when we started that debate, I said I wanted to start off by thanking the people of D.C. who have a real political grievance but did not knock out our windows and beat up the officers and try to storm the Capitol of the United States. And you can imagine what would have happened if that had taken place. But it is a race there. But the good news is that, look, forgive me, I'll speak in a partisan tone here, but the Democratic Party post-Donald Trump is a very different party than pre-Donald Trump. Don't mess with us, you know? Steve Bannon, you've got a bipartisan select committee which is not going to allow you to violate the law and disobey a subpoena of the United States House of Representatives. Right. We're going to send We're going to send all the information to the Department of Justice and ask for criminal contempt. And we've got the civil contempt option, and we've got the option that hasn't been used for 75 or 80 years, the inherent contempt power of Congress. But the bottom line is we need to get our friend Joe Biden to talk to Joe Manchin and to Kirsten Sinema. We need to pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Act and then the Freedom to Vote Act for everybody, because that's fundamental. And if you can waive the rules of the filibuster for judicial confirmation, you can do it for the right to vote for 300 million Americans. And that we've got to do. So right after we get done Build Back Better, we're coming right back to the right to vote, right back to statehood for the people in D.C., right back to statehood for 3.5 million people in Puerto Rico who've been disenfranchised and have learned the bitter taste of disenfranchisement and colonial rule when they got cheated out of hundreds of millions of dollars of federal aid with Hurricane Maria, and Donald Trump threw a bunch of paper towels at them instead, and that's what they got. So I think that our people understand the stakes now, because it's not just democracy in America, it's democracy all over the world. Every dictator, every kleptocrat, bully, tyrant, despot, autocrat, from Putin in Russia to General Xi in China to Orban in Hungary to Duterte in the Philippines to you name it, all of them are rooting for Donald Trump to come back. And they're down there at Mar-a-Lago planning the big comeback because that really could be the end of democracy in America if we let them come back. So we need to be mobilized like hell for the 2022 elections, because the people that we elect in 2020, it's either going to be a Democratic majority or Republican majority. That majority is going to be sitting in Congress in 2024 when the electors come in. Who's going to be counting the Electoral College vote in 2024? So I don't mean to scare you, but nobody can go to sleep right now. We were 10 votes short in the Senate of convicting Donald Trump. 10 Republican senators short, and so we're right back in the thick of it again. But it was 57 to 43, the most sweeping bipartisan vote for a presidential conviction in the history of the United States of America. And don't ever let them forget that. That disgraced, twice impeached president.
I want to give you the last word, Kim, in terms of action steps for folks. The congressman is doing his bit in Washington, along with his colleagues. We have our books, right? Everybody has their copy of Critical Race Theory, the reader, and you've signed up to get the next book when it comes, Kim. But everybody here represents a potential voice, has a potential voice, has a voice, and has a relationship to a school system of some kind, either one that their kids attend, or one that they are on the PTA of, or one that they taught in, or love somebody who taught in. What can they do? And what do they need to do when they hear critical race theory under attack?
So one thing that they definitely need to do is follow the money, follow the suppression, follow the censorship, follow the arguments that don't acknowledge that this is exactly the road to authoritarianism. I think one of our problems is we think it can't happen here. We think we're special. And for people to think it can't happen here means that they've completely disregarded the history of white supremacy. That's what it was, right? It was a racial fascism, but it was that nonetheless. We're heading in that direction. So anyone who doesn't talk about cancel culture and references what's happening in our legislatures is not talking about the true threat that we're dealing with right now. Anyone who bemoans the idea of wokeness and doesn't think and talk about the fact that right now more people are upset about the fantasy of what's going on in classrooms than the reality of the corpse of the Confederacy marching through the Capitol. If you're more upset about a fiction than a reality, then we've got a problem. And so we know that there are plenty of people that are not really activated. And the question is, how do we get them activated? I think two things. One, we actually need to support those who are trying to push back against all of these myths and these lies. The African American Policy Forum has Truth Be Told. The Legal Defense Fund also supports the efforts to actually activate teachers and parents across the country to get involved in the debates going on in their school boards. And you know what? You don't have to have a kid in schools, because a lot of these people don't have kids in schools. They see this as a way of taking over a particular organ of the state and shaping it to their preferences. If they're excited and motivated by the lie, we cannot afford not to be excited and motivated by the vision of equality and the democracy that we think we deserve. So one of the things I've been saying all along, there's no daylight between our multiracial democracy and racial justice. You cannot support democracy and let this attack on anti-racism go down. And you can't support anti-racism and not be deeply concerned about our democracy. They are one and the same.
Kimberlé Crenshaw, Jamie Raskin, thank you so much.
I think everyone in this room feels privileged to have heard that. That was amazing. Thank you. Thank you, Laura. We want to thank Jamie and Kim for being here tonight and taking the time to do this. Wow, I'm very touched. Laura Flanders, thank you. Very heartfelt thank you to Laura, our fearless, fantastic facilitator. Don't forget to check out lauraflanders.org. I want to thank a number of people in this room and beyond. Sarah Burns and Amy Glickman are our gala co-chairs who made tonight possible. We have a number of New Press board members here with us in the room, as well as on the live stream. Could I just ask the board members in the room to stand up for 1 minute and be recognized, please? They are an amazing group, and particular thanks to Robert Raymond for those lovely remarks. I have the best colleagues in the world, and I would love my colleagues in the room to stand up and be recognized, please. New Press staff. And of course, many, many thanks to our funders, including our fearless funder, Agnes Gund, who was not able to join us this evening, sadly, but is represented a little bit by Helena Huang, our former New Press board member who runs Aggie's Art for Justice Fund. Helena, are you still here? There she is. I'd like to thank our social justice champions, Patricia Bauman, Abigail Disney, Amy Glickman, Debbie and Jonathan Klein, Gary Lippman, Frederica Pereira, Fritz Schwartz, and the Svetlana and Herbert Wachtel Foundation. Our chair circle donors, board member Bruce Gottlieb and Katie Fallow, Priscilla Kauf, board member Robert Rabin, and the V-Day crew who are here today, V herself, Susan, Toni, and the whole gang. Where are you? There they are. Thank you for coming, and thank you for your support. Special thanks to Ingram Two Rivers, our distributor, and Maple Press, our printer. Representatives of those organizations are here. Can you give a wave? Those guys have seen us through a year of surprise reprints and supply chain headaches. Oh, by the way, the new Jim Crow is on that list of 800 books that they're checking out in Texas. I think probably some other New Press books, too. Thank you to everyone on our 2021 host committee and front list ticket holders. We could not have done this without your commitment and support. Special thanks to our photographer tonight, Brennan Kavanaugh, our video team, Tim Persinko, everyone at Owl Ear Media, our AV team, Alan Gingold of Blue Line Productions, and Allison Pike and the entire Water Club staff for making this such a seamless and memorable evening. Harper's Magazine and The Nation. You saw Don Guttenklam here before. Thank you for giving us copies of your current issues, which are in everybody's goodie bags. Many thanks to my longtime friend Robin Bellamy and her colleague Erin Powers for their hard work in planning and producing tonight's event. Okay, I do have the best colleagues in the world. So my colleagues James Phelan and Aranga Fernando and Danica Tablante, who put tonight together, met each other in person for the first time yesterday. This has been a wild ride. You guys are the best. This is a beautiful event, and thank you from the bottom of my heart. And lastly, thanks to everyone watching at home tonight. I hope the live stream experience has made you feel a bit closer to all of us tonight as we attempted to pull off a complex hybrid event. And here's to seeing everyone in person next year. Thank you.